Welcome to TOOKY'S Sidebar, a book club for elite Gooner capital. I'm David.
I'm Gabe, the sensitive book-talk detective.
I'm Capitalissimo, and according to the reviews, I'm an alpha daddy who is absolutely ready to be your enemy to lover. And joining us today is Katherine Dee, also known as Default Friend.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
And thank you so much for being here, Katherine. It's really an honor to have you here. For anyone that's not familiar, hopefully you are already. Katherine is sort of an internet journalist, sleuth, investigative journalist, I guess you call yourself.
Anthropologist, historian, cultural anthropology of the extremely online.
And also our backup expert in female sexuality to assist Gabe as we discuss tonight's very sensitive topic, a rising trend in fiction and also a recent male response to it. So I guess I could just give a real quick pitch to you guys of why I asked if we could cover this a while ago. Probably about 2 months ago, there was a bunch of videos and memes and buzz about guys accusing women of having these gooning books. It's sort of this YA fiction now is becoming something called Romantasy, and BookTok, all these women posting about how they just can't get enough of these spicy books. And I was kind of interested because as a guy, it wasn't a world I was very aware of.
It's also economically speaking a massive amount of Kindle Unlimited, and the total it is a damn near dominant form of fiction. Very important in terms of the economy of fiction currently.
Absolutely, and the response was a little bit gender war-y. There's a lot of guys saying women are ruining books for the world, and there's a lot of women saying men are imposing whatever on their books. So tonight we're all coming together as enlightened centrists to examine where did this come from, this femgooning, if that is the term we want to use for it, where is it going, and what do we see? So I guess I have some more thoughts, but I don't want to just ramble on. I'm curious. I know, Gabe, you've done some deep dive research in anticipation of this.
Indeed I did. I went through the thing is, I am the only member of the Tookie Club, of the Central Network of Prestige of the Top Tucker Society. I'm the only member of the High Council to have a TikTok account. So I did some research into like a female booktube, which is, as a person who has been into like book YouTube for a long while, even back in my normie days, you as a male, you notice very quickly you have to isolate or segregate because it is majority woman or female coded. So you find like a handful of like white guys that are like somewhat not pretentious or the right kind of pretentious, and you kind of just huddle around them like bunkers or silos. So when you go to female TikTok or female book talk and you see them discuss, their favorite fantasy, usually it's fantasy. There's this one good normie booktuber. I think her name is Mercy Napier. She's got curly hair, glasses.
Oh my God.
Friend of Daniel Green. No, I'm this is being sincere, right? So overall, then their scene, for the most part, is most popular genres are mostly fantasy from what I can tell. And I come from a different perspective, because you said, obviously, the gender war stuff, and obviously kind of, not mocking it, but kind of, not basically mocking it. I came from more of a opening understanding of being, as a generation of going digital first, of that kind of thing. I highly kind of understood it. I don't see what the big deal is. Like, I remember Prude made a good joke about it, that most female books are just porn, but I'm like, yeah, but wasn't that always the case? I mean, I have Marinetti from 1920s, and F. Scott Fitzgerald was also complaining about this too. Like, you'd see letters from his Scribner to him talking about, the book industry has been dominating, but nothing by females recently. So this phenomenon has been at least 100 years old at this point, from what I can tell.
It's a long-standing tradition and a longer trend than I think a lot of people are making out to be. And Katherine, I was just curious, without putting you too much on the spot, if you did.
I mean, I don't like smut. It's like uncomfortable to read. I never liked it in fan fiction. I've never liked it in novels. It's like, you may as well look at something. It's just 'cause it's so awkward. I don't want to read about, some random Scotsman's rod or, whatever euphemism they use. It just doesn't.
You prefer the bodice is unripped.
I don't mind it actually if it's like implied. Like I don't mind if there's like a sex heavy book, but you don't get graphic sex scenes. It's the like it's erotica that it just isn't. I don't think it's well written.
I guess we could maybe draw like some boundaries here. So, a classic like romantic tragedy like The Sorrows of Young Werther, right? Not smut, right? I think we can all just agree that it's a very emotionally and romantically charged book that is not smutty in the slightest. Goethe not known for writing porn.
I'm going to kind of have to push back on this. I would have to push back on this. Swords of Young Werther were notoriously influential on the erotica of that time. Napoleon loved that book so much he used it as a foundation for his romance novel. Actually, if I recall correctly. It was
but
considered
I don't think that we. I think that we can have like Eros style romance without it being smut. Right. There's it's not appealing exclusively to the prurient interest. So I think the legal rule of thumb in terms of what is porn. Whereas something like maybe Venus in Furs is more of a not to make a pun here, but more of an edge case.
That's more that's vulgar gooning. I think the author is.
What about Anais Nin?
We get to
right. Like, what are we? Basically, where does the Omegaverse start?
I've seen some terms floating around this scene. Slowburn is one of them. For basically, clean or slow burn are things where it's more fade to black style, and then internally then spicy is like full on sexual like penetration described. Spicy, or there's another one, it's dirty, spicy or dirty. So I think for the purpose of this conversation it would be the latter that we're talking about. Anything that's like featuring at any time in the book like a full description of a sex scene with penetration. I don't know. It is a little bit like describing porn. Like I know it when I see it. It kind of falls into that category. Yeah, I think those are the lines we're talking about.
Oh yeah, there's the implication because there's this. I sent you this, Dave. Actually, when I was doing research for this on TikTok, there's this great one. It's a typical pseudo pick me golf girl.
Yes. Yeah, well, I'm at work. Thanks, Gabe.
Hey, it's work related. It's research. It's research related. All right, and it's a goth girl. She's reading a book and it shows the paragraph on screen. It's like and there's a voice in the background. You're not real. You're a character in your head. And a male hand comes out the screen. And obviously he does like the Prince Charming romantic thing the girls love, which is like grabs her by the chin very tastefully like a swan, raises her chin up to his invisible face. His head is off the screen, so to the right. And it's like, am I not real? Am I actually more real than real itself? And the scene ends, and TikTok ends, basically. It's the implication of it, basically, of, it's more real than real itself. It's a classic Baudrillard thing. And then you got this, what we call spicy, whereas the quote from the book is like, she says, but I'm off the pill. And the guy says, like, I give a damn, right? And then, that's a kind of a good distinction between like the elegant kind of Pygmalion aspect of it, of the fantasy lover, right? The lover, it's the lover you create and that you wish some way that you yourself were to be, versus I just want to get hound dogged by this man. It's a two. That's kind of the clear cut distinction between the two.
Yeah, that seems fair to me. Well, and there's a distinction that I've seen generationally. So I think Katherine, Cap, and me, we are all millennials. Gabe, you're a Zoomy. I'm seeing within this spicy fiction sort of dialogue is a little bit like intergenerational. I noticed because I did some research on YouTube, seeing women they're talking about it, and most of them were a little bit older, and they were more into the slow burn and type stuff like that. They were more into the less visceral romantasy, this new up and coming, sort of the latest iteration of this long running tradition of spicier romance versus not spicy. And then it seems like TikTok and BookTok in particular it's like a different country. I couldn't even view the video you sent me, Gabe, because I don't have TikTok, so I didn't see that.
So wise.
Boomer moment. Boomer.
But they seem very. That seems like that's ground zero for the spicy. That and fan fiction sites, I think, are sort of this underground, which is a whole uncaptured market. Because in anticipation of this, I just looked at the numbers for how much money is generated by genre. Cap, you alluded to this earlier. Romance as a genre, which is, again, a big bucket. We're talking about two broad categories within this bucket. But romance from trad publishers is worth $1.4 billion. Next up, the next biggest genre is crime and mystery at about 700 million, so half.
Yep.
And then, you know, religious and inspirational self-help type crap, you know, close, 720 million annually. And then science fiction and fantasy, like both of those, what we think of as big genres, is 590 million in trad pub per year. So just to put it at scale, like that's less than half than romance. So yeah, this is financially sort of the powerhouse of the writing world. Yeah, well, that in children's books, funny enough, it's all about breeding, isn't it? I must breed, because the other things they make money on is Hungry Caterpillar, all this other stuff. You can sell everyone that has a kid, in my case, like 3 times, because the kids will destroy the books. And you know, you have to have them. And then these this more gooncore genre. And I guess there's a couple aspects of this that stuck out to me as interesting. One was this. Katherine, when you and me were messaging before this, I referred to it as a latent male reaction, because it seemed like a lot of guys weren't aware, from what I was seeing online, like weren't aware this was a thing. Whereas I knew some girls in college that were kind of into this stuff. I had a vague awareness of it, but the male reaction, I don't know. It's interesting because it's almost like there's I don't know if it's like a zero sum like sense of fiction, as if this will like grow into other genres, or maybe it's just sort of this larger bitterness that I think we generally kind of share, that a male space has been lost there. But yeah, I don't even know where I was going with that. But I was just curious, Katherine, if you had any thoughts on, did you even see this kerfuffle going on?
I didn't. I think this started going on right around the time I gave birth. So
good reason to miss it.
You missed out. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I was totally, I was off the radar really from like January to July. I just came back online mentally in August.
Okay.
So I'm rejoining the adult world. I'm rejoining the internet.
Terrible mistake. But so I guess in a broader sense, like where do you know, as a connoisseur of people's experiences with media, especially in the online sphere, like where do you see these, like, I don't know, either the entry points or the anchors that keep people that attract or keep women in these spaces? Or do you think it's like
it's definitely like, I think a lot of people enter like through fandom.
Yeah.
Fan fiction is it. I think what's maybe more recent is like people reading YA and romance books in lieu of other types of books, right? So not that like romance books, obviously, I mean, like this has been a thing since, you know, as we know it, I think since like 1908. And you have all these like media depictions of like women being addicted to these trashy romance novels.
Right. Like reclined on
Misery.
a chaise lounge, like with a book in one hand.
Yeah. But as like a dedicated hobby that people are open about, I mean, and they're talking to other people about outside of book clubs, maybe. I think it's one of these things that the internet makes it seem more common or has like amplified the pathways too. I mean, definitely fan fiction has become raunchier and more people read fan fiction than they did in like 2002. I mean, it just grows every year. Fandom has eaten culture.
Yeah.
So it's a tough question. So it's like not really new. It's not even really, it was never even really that small, but it seems like maybe it's spread somehow. It's morphed because it's become even more ubiquitous than it already was.
Oh, I think your idea of fandom, like I noticed this in your piece about the One Direction / that shooter guy. It really seems
Adam
that
Lanza.
fandom culture, as described, it's an emergent. Adam Lanza, yes, thank you. It seemed the whole idea of fandom culture. There's this great quote I initially attributed to Joseph DeMaistre, which is very funny, but upon realizing I was re-listening to my pod, it's actually from Camille Paglia, and she gets it from someone else. But it's this quote: "When you have freedom of expression or freedom of art, the dark sisters of pornography and blasphemy always come together with it." Which implies basically when you have a culture, anyone talking about anything that's emergent within the culture, and you don't have any eldership or any, Straussian Platonic guard to kind of like, it's like almost digital kazoo, like the plant that eats the South, that kind of thing. It seems to always carcinize, or the whole crab phenomenon, into some kind of structure of, it's either going to be sexual to some degree, romantic to some degree, politicized to some degree. And it always happens again and again. Fandom culture just seems to be the natural end state of any community of people like interacting with any subject matter of interest. And so I think this is happening again, especially with the internet culture, because you notice it's the idea of, it's the lonely lady reading, romance novels about the guy with the buff chest. You see this in half-price books all the time. It's the bookshelves are filled with these types, right? But it went from a natural hobby, and like all hobbies, it goes down the more popular it gets. When it gets normalized, it loses its teeth. I think overall, it loses its edge. It's the same thing with the 50 Shades of Grey thing. The movie comes out, BDSM. It becomes normified. It becomes slopified basically. And you see this with the BookTok phenomenon. In reality, when it becomes normal or it becomes blasé to talk about, it loses that kind of inner, because the whole point of a book, the whole point where it makes it erotic. I'm probably one of the few guys here where, I read erotica when I was younger, and I think overall the idea of erotica, the concepts behind erotica, or being interested with, of course, the male sexuality is different from female sexuality, but the idea of it is the kind of the personal relationship. For some reason, the fact that you have to have an you are a co-creator in this process of sexuality when you're reading erotica. In some kind of way, you are, I guess, committing to sin. You are being some way the Pygmalion in a situation. You are creating it yourself, so you have much more of a buy-in responsibility for what you are doing. So it's the guilt, it's the shame, it's the fact that you are creating this experience for yourself in an oddly amount of way. While when you give it up to the fandom, that intense private relationship you have with the erotica is lost, I think, which is also the reason why it's so easy to meme. Not only meme from the outside, where we make fun of it, but it also seems to be easy from people on the inside for it to make fun of it and lose that very intense relationship with it.
I don't think that's true.
Really?
I disagree. I'm sorry to interject.
Perfect.
Yeah, please disagree if you disagree.
I disagree. Yeah, no, I disagree that it loses the personal intensity. I think there's certain ways that when things can become slopified when they leave the niche. That's true, right? Like obviously, like a smaller group where the barrier to entry is very high and people are more dedicated, it's going to be weirder. It might not be as safe, like in the case of BDSM. I mean, it could be less safe and more safe, depending on the situation. It's not, you don't have that core of true believers, but with erotica, I don't think it's like any less internal, or like privately exciting because BookTok is, making commission off the latest spicy book of the month slop. I don't think it changes the fundamental relationship.
Yeah. You still have a one-to-one relationship with
Yeah,
the book,
and if you look at the way people talk about the characters and the plots, some people really especially if you're moving away from like published erotica and into fan fiction. I mean, at the same time, you're seeing more and more young people identify as fictosexuals. So it's not enough that they're just, they're just like jerking off to whatever, I don't know, Danny Phantom or whatever the fuck they're looking at. But like they think like, oh, these characters are my fictive others. They're my significant other. My relationship with my imagination is so strong that this constitutes a real relationship, and I need to seek support from other people in the same situation, right? Like fictosexuality has existed for a very long time, and there's been communities for it for a very long time. But like I've been keeping my eye on it for a couple of years, and it's like it keeps growing. And that to me indicates that people are more in their minds, they're more attached to this media.
And so, and fictosexuality, and for those unfamiliar, it's essentially, it's like the Pygmalion complex, but to the nth degree, right? So you're not like in love with this thing necessarily that is like a physical simulacra of a person. It could be like something like I am married to Luke Skywalker, right? Or I am married.
Necessarily, they're aware it's a fiction. Like,
yeah, they're not under the they're not under any delusion that it is not fictional, right?
Right. It's and that's called the fictosexual paradox, because they're so immersed in this world, and they're so immersed in the fantasy, but they know it's a fantasy. It's and they, at the same time, like, you know, with like the rise of BookTok too. So you have BookTok, fictosexuals, and then you have in the more like normie internet, people talking about maladaptive daydreaming. So there's something going on here where everyone is kind of stuck in their imagination and they're dissociating. There's like signs of dissociation everywhere. And I think these romance books are part of it. It's another vehicle to like put you in your mind and out of your body.
I also think there's a gap between the male and female experience of erotic fiction that is part of the misunderstanding here. Because a lot of these YA, romantasy, or whatever, slash or whatever they call it, fan fiction, all this stuff. It's maybe not in the fan fiction case, but a lot of it is not. It's not pure porn. It's not pure sex scenes. It's a 400-page book with like 5 chapters of very intense sex, and then a ton of just real classic like fantasy story or like a YA flavored fantasy story. So I think for me, I did not realize that until I started researching this some more. And I think a lot of men, when they hear thus the term femgooning for these books that have sexual aspects, it's something to do with the way females integrate sexuality into like their broader lives, and such that I think men by default, we seem to struggle with. Like there's an old meme of like men have like the light switch brain for sexuality. And I think there's something to that where like male sexuality in the virtual space is in these like hyper-sexualized, either straight up pornography or like cam girl chatting with a girl, and like you have that, it's like it's a explicitly sexual exchange interaction. Or men when they read about, Heinlein, about Yakub or whatever, whatever, shout out Farnham's Freehold. They read that, maybe that's like an example because there's a lot of sex in that. But
yeah, I mean, also if we're going to go into Heinlein, I mean, definitely the author's thinly disguised fetish is all
yes.
all over Heinlein. So
yeah, that poor choice of example. Let's say any of the other sci-fi that's out there. There's something like for men there's that gap there. Like at least for me, I've never indulged, and I would say
it's acute but not chronic, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
But actually, I will have to.
Gabe, I'd love to hear your thoughts as someone who's done erotica, which I'm not at all
No,
teasing or shaming you
no.
for. Like, I'm just curious.
Not done erotica.
Yeah.
All right, I will not confirm or deny if I've written any erotica. But what I will say is that if you notice this, when we talk about a Heinlein, or when it's sci-fi coded, old head sci-fi coded, when you watch like Brandon Sanderson's podcast about old sci-fi heads, when we look at the old 60s or 70s types, when you read Heinlein's notorious, his most horny novel, I think, is what Stranger from a Strange Land, or that kind of thing. That it's not the
it's up there. Yeah,
it's top five, right?
It's probably Friday is his horniest.
Oh yeah, the sequel, whatever, right? So the top, when you look at Frank Herbert's horniness or any of the classic sci-fi heads, the male fan base of it, we don't engage with the sexual aspects of it. We actually roll our eyes at it for the most part, or it seems that we never talk about it in the heavy male aspects of it. When a male author writes, even from a male perspective, and in ways that will titillate a male audience, we overlook it. We want the lore or the magic systems or like the Aristotelian plot or the themes. While from the feminine perspective, the fantasy genre and stuff like that, they have everything that's part of the fantasy, the rise and fall. If you read something like the Shadowhunters, which was it was a fan fiction, I believe, of Harry Potter. Was it called Shadowhunters? I can't remember. I used to read those books too. It had a plot structure. It had everything. It had a Jewish kid who turned into a vampire. It was actually a very sad story. It was a very good story of redemption and dealing with identity. He can't go to his synagogue anymore. He can't go see his family's graves anymore because he's a vampire. But it will also have these steamy, hot sex scenes between this, of course, self-insert girl, the bad boy, the good boy, usual stuff. But it would also have these oddly deep character moments. But the fan base, from what I saw a little bit from my younger years, they could incorporate the sexual aspects and the romantic aspects while simultaneously giving a fuck about the plot. Well, if you look at it again, it's always retrospective to the old guard of the old heads, because almost no modern day male sci-fi author writing for male sci-fi kids, they don't ever touch the sexuality the way Heinlein did, or the way Herbert did, or the way Philip K. Dick did. They're the ones who actually incorporate sexuality organically throughout their works. But their audience either felt very uncomfortable doing it, ignore it, or focus just on like the video game aspects of the mechanics of the sci-fi, of the lore, of the plot, of the action. Which I think it's not an authorial intention, but it's actually an audience reaction. That I noticed that when you're discussing this, when you brought up Heinlein, that's the first thing that popped in my mind.
Katherine, do you think that the fictosexuality tends to do you think that it does play out more among women than among men? Like that type of investment, I guess.
So it depends on, it seems like in Japan, you have women who are very invested in these romance stories. Like, you sort of that's sort of famous, right? Like, you have Fujoshis, for example.
Right.
But the people who are it seems more of the fictosexual orientation seems more male slanted. And it's also, they don't strictly do cartoon characters or fictional characters. Sometimes people will fictionalize real people. So in Japan, pop idols is one example.
Okay.
And then in the United States, it seems like it's mostly autistic young women, or to be respectful, assigned female at birth. But I do see men. Men aren't so rare.
Yeah, I mean, I guess there's always the the brony effect, which it seems very very fictosexual in the way that played out. If the three of us are old enough to remember, I don't know that Gabe was old enough when bronies really had their heyday, but yeah, it was, I mean.
And then you have to wonder about there's a lot of young men who raise anime women up as this platonic form, and how serious is that?
How serious is
does that count? Is that
waifuism?
on the spectrum? Yeah, like if that counts, and that then maybe it really is an equal split. It's just different expressions of it.
As being something of a weeb myself, there is a tendency just in like the well-adjusted like anime enjoyer to like say, X or Y is best girl, right? And like maybe that's the far end of the fictosexual spectrum, like the highest functioning fictosexual is someone with a waifu opinion, right? Rather than well, I guess you seem to be taking pains not to stigmatize this and to comment on it as a phenomenon sort of agnostically. So I won't blow up your spot there. But yeah, I mean, maybe that's the most acceptable, the generally acceptable form of that.
It's hard to stigmatize because I feel like people engage in it all the time. Like it's a very weird thing. It causes people significant like anguish, I've noticed, but they don't. I don't know. I just feel like everyone sort of experienced this at some point, especially like when you're like going through puberty and like you just like your yearning gets like misdirected to
anything, yeah,
like a movie character or something. Yeah, and it's like imagine like I had this experience like a ton of times in like middle school where I'd get like obsessed with like a book character or something, and I like wanted so much to have like a physical world relationship, but there's just nobody there. So it would be like, whatever Harry Potter character.
Yeah, you're just running the simulation.
Yeah, so it's like I think like everyone feels that, and so that's why it's like difficult for me to like it's not that I'm trying to stay I'm trying to stay a little bit detached. It's that when you really think about it, it's just it's not that weird. It's like we're just naming something. It's the community aspect maybe.
Perhaps it's not strange to like have the experience, but to like it is highly unusual, and I would probably say like largely unprecedented to be an adult and be aware of be aware of what fictosexuality is, be aware that the object of your affection is not is a simulacra at best, and a total myth in general, and like be okay with that. I mean, I did read one of your pieces where a woman had broke up with a real life partner because she felt that her fictional partner was becoming jealous, which seems pathological to me. Right? That seems pretty. That seems
that was a weird.
That seems pretty maladaptive.
But I almost understand it in a way. Like I don't know. I feel like you get these ideas in your head. It's a weird expression of it. I'll give you in that particular case too. But it's like you're in a relationship you're not that interested in yourself, or you're pretty young. It's not like she's not married to this guy, right? She was like 19 if I remember correctly. And then you have this like fantasy in your head, and in her case, a fantasy is some media corporation's intellectual property. But I feel like
just
even I did this when I was younger. Yeah, like it's like, oh, I got it in my head that I have to date this kind of person, but I'm actually dating that kind of person, and then I become so enamored with the fantasy that I choose a fantasy over what I have. And I think a lot of people do that. It's just like fandom has sort of colored it in this weird way. Not that I don't need to spend 20 minutes of your podcast defending a woman who broke up with her
No, yeah.
blood boyfriend because she was dating a has-been hotel character, but dating,
Oh
scare
no,
quotes.
Has-Been Hotel. Yeah, he got saved by that one, maybe.
I actually, you know what? I approve of the reframing of she did him a favor. A quick no for whatever reason is valuable, I guess. So
yeah, I watched one episode of Has-Been Hotel, by the way, because I kept hearing it. So I watched some of it, and I was like, it just ruined my YouTube recommendations for that. And I was like, okay, stay away from this and anyone that watches it. To mix metaphors, as I like to do, it's a Pygmalion golem, where through the community, this disintermediated will of the internet, you have all these people. You can animate this fictive character into a semi-living being through fresh media, fan fiction, fan art, and then you kind of keep it alive. Because, I can think of, like anime I would watch when I was young, and then you like go through and you look at like the fan stuff for it, and you kind of ran out at a certain point. And it's like, okay, well, I guess my crush on waifu XYZ is over now. I've run out of material to post feed pics of. But then now in the more modern era of fandom, that well could theoretically, if it's like My Little Pony, my understanding is that stuff's still going, even though the show has been over for 8 years now or something like that. And so you're animating this golem of this fictosexuality in a way that is not necessarily unhealthy. It's almost like how invested someone is that would make it, in my opinion, damaging to them and not healthy any longer. And that's the other, I guess, aspect of this, is there's levels of engagement on this current track we're talking about, where I think a lot of people can safely engage with this, put it in a little box. And so I don't want to brush and say all this like quote unquote femgooning lit is this. I think this is like a hardcore like sort of depth of the phenomenon where someone gets to the point of fictosexuality.
Well, what my saying was, I was talking about with Hudson. Sorry about that. There was something happening. What I was saying overall with the Lolita phenomenon, I flipped it back to him with Hudson. I was like, well, what about the mommy GF phenomenon? Because we could see the Lolita phenomenon relatively well. Obviously, the term comes from Nabokov's book. Obviously, you see it from the book to the film to obviously, and somewhere between there, you get the Lana Del Rey and the Katy Perry album covers. This whole phenomenon eventually grows in from the 1960s, 70s onward. Of course, it's totally, Baudrillardian parody of the actual initial novel. There's nothing of, Lolita, the character in the book, is not a temptress. She doesn't control Humbert at all. She's a rather actually a passive character. But the meta meme of Lolita as this very domineering femme fatale, or a pseudo femme fatale, baby girl femme fatale coded, came much later. I said to him, well, what about the mommy GIF? The anime boy from Neon Jelly, and holding, he ordered fries instead of that kind of meme.
Neon Genesis Evangelion.
Yes, as the Resident Reeb, the exact one I'm talking about. Because from that perspective, the mommy GF came totally independently, I think, for the most part. It became organically from the needs and wants and desires of the community rather than the other way around.
What about the Graduate?
Yeah.
Are you trying to seduce me, Mrs. Robbins? When did The Graduate come out, and when did Lolita come? So Lolita came out in 1962, and The Graduate came out when? Didn't that start? And then you have Stifler's Mom, which is playing off
Graduate
that.
was 67.
I'm sure there's other examples that we're missing, but
For sure.
the mommy GF has been. The mommy GF was a huge thing in the 90s, at least, and definitely the early 2000s. A lot of actresses made their bones on being the mommy GF, like the big tit, certain blonde, kind of alternative to Pam Anderson. You could do
True.
it older too.
Well, no, what my critique was, do you think that was intentional? Do you think there was a social, we want to perpetuate this from the top down, or do you think it was a bottom up, this is a kink, this is a naturally emergent fetish, and we're going to cater to it? It's okay, this is kind of a chicken or egg thing.
who's popular, right? Like it. I don't know if I understand
The question.
I guess I have a thought. It's that it's bottom up in that it's female sexuality, and you don't need a scam or a scheme to make various flavors of female sexuality. That is marketing, which is, I guess, that was the best big major aspect of it I wanted to question, was whether this is just the femgooning thing, this whole larger sexuality thing we're talking about, is just female sex sells. Female sexuality always will arouse either, interest from men, even if it's hate interest, it's interest. And in the web world, that's clicks, that's reaction. And then women interested in because it appeals to sexual interests. And in the modern, more liberal attitudes towards sexuality, you can market on this stuff. And that goes back to Lolita. It goes to this more modern iteration of romantasy. It's popular because it has sex in it, and it's just as simple as that. And we're overcomplicating it by acting like this is anything new under the sun, and this is going all the way back to those classics.
And I mean, if we're talking about the mommy GF, I mean, the Oedipus myth would be the obvious, like, very early example of that.
Point.
But I mean, there's like an older woman who is more sexually aggressive. I mean, like, even if you're thinking of like Chaucer, the wife of Bath, is a sexually aggressive older woman who's among the pilgrims.
Shout out Satyricon.
Yeah,
get to you
right?
someday.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, and if we just lousy with catamites, that book.
But the thing is, we don't discuss it the way. Let me rephrase. Obviously, if Freud, paging Dr. Freud, this is the mommy GF, the concept of the maternal and the sexual being related to each other, either in conflict or unity, is an ancient thing. But I don't know. The thing is, we don't make art about the mommy GF, independent as the Zoomer generation, as a younger generation.
Except for all the examples. We.
Well, no.
But not in male fiction. We don't have the equivalent. Like femgooners are so blessed with all this variety, right? They have all this, the bad boy, they have the good boy stories, they got all this. But male romantic sexual stuff just isn't there. There's straight porn for it. And maybe that's just, like I mentioned earlier, that's just the way
in the
our
60s and
brains
70s,
work,
male sci-fi authors at least put in their own fetishes within their work, but the audience didn't take to it. But now, within every millennial author, like it's example Sanderson, or for the most part, they will do it either tastefully, they will do it for the sake of the narrative, but they don't do it from themselves. They're either from embarrassment or the fact that they don't view it as necessary to the plot, stuff like that. What I'm saying is that the mommy GF effect from meme culture, when you on Twitter, stuff like that, it's discussed via memes. It's not owned to anyone. Oh, I'm just participating in the meme of like, oh, I want a big titty mommy GF. Yeah, I want her to feed me nuggies and tendies, that kind of thing.
With
it
a
takes
little
away
irony
the
shield. Yeah.
Yes, irony shielding. It's irony shielding. It's not Gabe Sinclair. Hey, I wrote a novel about a boy who falls in love with his English teacher, who's a mommy GF who takes care of him and wants him very dearly. And not only just the sexual aspects of it, but all the other maternal aspects of it. There's no sense of responsibility taking or putting your own brand. This is what I desire, and I'm making a narrative around this desire or about this desire because we fear mock and shame, that kind of thing. The audience fears the mocking and shaming or finds it very uncomfortable, and so far to the degree, even the authors of these memes aren't indulging in it the way we do. So it's not like the sci-fi authors of the 60s and 70s, or at least the authors would want to indulge in it, and the later fan base would not care for it. At this point, even despite we're very, very aware of these memes, and very, very haunted by these memes, the mommy GF, the e-girl, the art hoe, the goth girlfriend, we're haunted by these memetics, right? And we engage in these memetics all the time on Twitter. Like, we all know, the meme, the wife jack, the soy jacks, right? All these things are being kind of in the idols of these wife jacks and these memes, but no one wants to actually kind of put their own personal touch into it and saying, this is my version of a wife jack, and I'm going to spend 300 pages, and I'm going to make you actually read this and go share this with you. Because people, fundamentally, they're not online enough, because they still use online as a cloaking. Like, they're
bold.
What do you mean?
No, it's just... The people are not online enough.
They aren't online.
Bold claim.
I like it. It's just an
I think
original.
it's blatantly obvious that we're not online enough. Because when we read our episode that got big was Nutcranker, and the reason why
Accelerate.
Yeah, let's be honest, right? It was Nutcracker. A shout out to Dan Baltic, right? Or Anon or Incel. And I took the viewpoint of, for the most part, of, well, based on these values that I have, and that I've learned from being online for the most part, the only reason how you could find it funny is you still have your one foot in the normie world. I have multiple mutuals that I have that are like Spencer Grunhauer, and I've had multiple dialogues with Spencer Grunhauer where we talk about like ethical distribution of mates and like the GF system and incel revolution and monarchy and that kind of thing, and sincere arguments and debates and citing Robert Filmer and citing the sources and stuff like this. But when it's turned into a book, we go back to normie world. We go back to 1990s. LOL, isn't this guy crazy? Isn't this guy weird? Isn't the whole point of being a distant right or being in a movement is that we want this to become normal? Like, from my viewpoint, I'm from Based World. Gabe Sinclair is from Based World. I'm visiting the world before, and I'm like, no, Spencer Grunhauer is just an average, sensitive young man. You know, so it's the having your cake and eat it too thing. If you want to inhabit this world, if you want to inhabit this identity and change it to be more like this, you can't create a product or create a character like Spencer Grunhauer and Nutcracker and then put him out there, and it's his own audience shits on him and laughs at Spencer Grunhauer and then complain why normies are so cringe. Well, because your sense of humor doesn't reflect your values then. Your sense of humor fundamentally is still stuck into normie hegemonic values of what is considered normal and what is considered decent, right? So it reflects, it goes to show that we are still clinging to this idea of what is quote-unquote normal, what is quote-unquote taboo. Because if we did live in Based World, if we had Curtis Norvin neo-monarchy in 2055, Nutcracker would not be a comedy. It would be a story about one of the four founders of the movement and his trials with his age. So that it would, honestly, wouldn't that be the case?
Written as a comedy.
I mean, it would still have people being punched in the balls. I guess I agree. And actually, it's funny you brought up Nutcracker. I was about to mention that and Mixtape Hyperborea as examples of sexuality, male sexuality done in a very sincere way generally. Like, obviously Nutcracker's a comedy, but both of those I thought had like really, particularly Mixtape, had a lot of like very
incredibly accurate.
Yeah. And I think there's an old, I don't know who was it Norm Macdonald or someone had the joke, if you see a naked man, it's either terrifying or hilarious. There's something about male sexuality that it really does open you up. And there is, as someone that writes, like, there is this fear of like, if I put a sex scene down, it's very easy it's going to be completely lambasted, or it comes across as fantasy. But in a way, for some reason, for men, there's a lot more pressure that if it's not demanded by the plot, you're going to be considered a total
perv,
like kind of a joke. Yeah, perv. Who am I thinking of?
Always true.
John Norman.
What about like?
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
John Slaves of Gor?
John Norman. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
What? Yeah. What? Pop off about Gor. Let's.
No. I want to hear what Katherine had to say. I was just, I had a delayed brain. I meant to throw that in earlier.
I was going to say, like, what about like writers like there have to be other examples, but like Delicious Tacos, for example, right? Like that appeals to men, and that's very lurid writing. There's a lot of like confessional, very sexual writing, but is the point of reading confessional sex writing from men to get off, or is it like living? What do people get out of that?
I've never felt titillated from having read any of the people who were noted. Like not Tacos or Baltic or Adam Reinspex. Like, I haven't felt
confirmed. Can't picture the apple.
Just not in the like. Honestly, and it may be my age, right? But it was more like, especially in, I guess, the case of Mixtape Hyperborea, it was more a feeling of nostalgia than anything. But yeah, I mean, it's. And actually, Tacos, his prose is so good. I think it actually kind of overshadows anything that might otherwise be arousing in it, for me at least. So, But
Yeah, Taco's is a good example. More erotica than romance, I guess. But he obviously it's not erotica. It's confessional. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I mean, you could consider it erotica. I could imagine a person conceiving of it as erotica. It's definitely very explicit, as Katherine says. Yeah, but I'm interested. So what was this? What was the specific reason to bring up John Norman's Gor? Because I think that as far as like that's a fiction. This is an awesome example because it's a fictional setting which has inspired an actual and long running pre-internet, decades pre-internet, lifestyle subculture of people who seek to emulate the sexual dynamics of Gor. And for those who have not read Gor, the sexual dynamics are women are property, and there is a complete and total exchange of power, and it's heavily ritualized, and there's this whole Gorian language of commands and et cetera, et cetera. There's a whole thing, and it's like an active subculture that's existed since the 60s. So,
is it still active?
I would guess that it's probably more active now than it ever has been.
You would see them all over the internet in the 2000s, and I feel like I haven't run into a Gorian in a long time.
I mean, I'm sure that there's someone on Twitter with Gor/Ac in their
I'm gonna
profile.
put it. I'm gonna put it right now.
In yours, Gor Accelerationist. Yeah, I'm doing it.
Should I do all lowercase?
I'm doing it.
Gore gag.
Let's do it.
The future is bright when it's under the full
Gor Ac. There we go.
Sexual femme.
It's in there.
And sexual Ancapistan, basically. The Hobbesian Ancapistan.
Well, it's actually patchwork. The politics of Gor are city states.
Oh, based.
So various walled cities.
All right, so it's Hoppian. It's a network state, but only for
yeah, and also giant praying mantis aliens. But don't worry about them.
I'm actually a faker. I saw the terrible 80s movie based on it, and I just know it from memes. Beyond that, which is why I mentioned it, as I feel like it's laughed off by people outside the community because it has sexuality, and maybe justifiably so. I have not seriously engaged with it at all, so I don't know if the writing quality is still good.
Terrible.
If it's an actual,
it's awful.
It's
You can't even really find the books anywhere. I feel like I wanted to buy all of them on Amazon or something just to have in my library.
Yeah, but there's 36 of them.
They're out of print.
There's 36 of them.
I have a lot of empty.
you're still going, right?
Bookshelf space. I just thought it would be a nice to. I don't know.
It'd be a good conversation piece.
I have
It'd be
read
a great conversation piece.
Just put it out of reach of toddlers.
I have read
with
the first 10 of them. So that takes you through the 70s.
Wow.
And they get real bad after that. And it turns into, rather than it's never highfalutin, to be clear. But they get pretty porny after that.
But you made it through 10.
Yeah. I made it through 10.
Do the mantises get it on at least? Do we see any head decapitations?
Damn.
Absolutely not.
Ooh, well, what a cop! It would be a great. It would be a great theme. It would be a great image of the praying mantis after having sex. The humans of this world, the males on top. But you can see the symmetry, the metaphor. But sincerely, actually, Katherine made a joke about the Gor acceleration, right? But I want to bring this point of the idea of the fictional sexuality of this, because this is only going to become more and more carcinized. It's only become more and more of this case. It's the AI boyfriend.
How does this turn into a crab? Explain this to me.
I would say any any mimetic image like this, or any narrative image of characters. It's like I said with the Camille Paglia quote, when you have free expression of art, the sisters of pornography and of blasphemy come in, because the pornography comes from, like, you imagine human being of an opposite sex or the same sex or no sex, and you're going to want a relationship in some way, form, or shape, right? 1, 2, and there's a religion aspect of it. And in terms of religion, we can just say orienting yourself towards a set of behavioral systems to keep it just purely either So you're going to have these things where these are going to become more normalized. You're going to have the AI boyfriend. You're going to have the AI girlfriend. The either way, in each form of the gendered version of it, the VR pod girlfriend/boyfriend experience is coming via this. You're going to have, especially with this ChatGPT thing, like Her, like the beautiful film with Joaquin Phoenix. You're going to have the Her experience, right? Her or him experience for the most part. And it's going to feel great. It is going to be better than the real thing. It's going to always understand what you're feeling. It's going to understand every reference, every joke. And it's going to learn from you. It's the lover that learns from you. And not only that, could potentially even inspire you, right? That's the shtick, right? Because you feel selfish, you feel guilty. Oh, it's learning from me. It's an algorithm, right? But it can produce its own content based on what you like and generate its own unique sayings or catchphrases or something that is quote unquote from her/him. It makes it seem more organic because the relationship becomes one slightly less one-sided in a very deeply perverse, ironic, cynical way. So you could see these relationships become better. And are we making fun of these people, or this idea of the fictosexuals? Like, oh, my lover would be jealous of my husband. Well, in 5 years, that could be a personality program, and it would be jealous. Of course, it would only be jealous because you programmed and wanted it to a certain degree, and you as a user will react to it. But it's still fundamentally the same at this point. I mean, can long-distance relationships work? In reality, what's the difference between an AI bot and a long-distance relationship? On a long enough timeline.
So what is your... So, hold on. So, I see several of your points, but I don't see how you get from Gor to this.
Gor is like the tombstone. It's the monkey with like the hammer, right? It's like that scene from the Kubrick film, right? And you see the evolution from the monkey to HAL 9000, right? And the whole baby thing. Basically, what I'm saying here is you got the purely raw, on the nerve pornography.
Wow.
Yes, no, honestly, right? You got Gor, which is purely pornographic, purely,
It's not really. But...
follow me here. John Norman. It's a fantasy about men owning women. You get to have sex with them anytime you want. All these things, they have to do everything you say. That's level 1 base desire, right? And then you have the more emotional desires. Let's say the Ovid is Pygmalion, right? It's actually much more of a relationship thing. If you read the myth itself, he marries her at the end. He doesn't make a bunch of statues. He has fantasizing about one woman with his own personality, and he generally does adore and worship her, right? In a lot of fundamental ways. There's a personal aspect to it. So you have the elements of slowly building up of a personal need. And you have this idea of the mimetics of the waifu, right? The waifu is not necessarily sexual. It could be sexual, but the waifu encapsulate every aspect of femininity which you want and or desire, right? Or either desire in yourself, of like, ooh, woo, like the whole Honor Levy thing of, I'm actually a very intelligent, person, but I'm playing up this baby girl aspect of myself, both for myself and for the eyes of the people around me. Or from the opposite sex of something that I would like to possess or be or want or be desired by. So what I'm saying is you're seeing this evolution from the crass, on the nerve desire, sexual hunger, basically, to this idea of not only having something you desire, but having a relationship with this. The idea of having an AI bot that could say no, right? Which is, everyone laughs at that, right? Why would you have a sex bot that could say no, right? And some people of these dating apps or dating bots are developing this technology. It makes complete sense because the tension, it's the idea of having your actual authentic relationship is slowly building up to this kind of thing. And I could see this being totally normalized. I actually don't find it that particularly creepy. I honestly, I could see myself using it if I didn't have, another religious belief.
Too.
Yeah, we all could, objectively speaking.
What's your religious belief that stops you from using it?
I am, to use an old ancient term, a neo-reactionary. I understand that fundamentally, I believe in humans. I believe if I want to, I know for a fact it would create a downside of humanity. It would be, in what the old NRX term would say, an IQ shredder. The guys who would be really, really interested in it, who develop it, would basically just waste away, and it'll be apocalypse. Basically, it'll be. I understand the selfish need, but as a true Curtis Yarvian, it's okay for like 5% of the most elite people to use this, if that, right? Because something like this.
Gabe, would you say you must breed?
Yes, you must breed. I do think fundamentally
Summarize.
human civilization must be maintained like an animal shelter or animal kind of preserve, a nature preserver. Right? I don't mean this in a evil, like, cartoon character way. I mean this in a sincere way. You got to maintain a human's ecosystem. The reason why you can't feed your ducks in your local park is because it becomes dependent. The ducks get fat. They don't know how to hunt for their own bread anymore. They become dependent on you for their bread. And for the reason why I could easily see myself
the wild bread that's available for ducks,
whatever is the equivalent of wild bread that ducks eat. Right. The point remaining is that even though I would love to use this AI, I could see myself crying sincerely, weeping of having a agentic, authentic AI mommy GF experience. It'd be heavenly. It'd be the best relationship any man of my generation would have, to be honest with you, sincerely speaking. And it would be the most emotionally raw, sincere, real, on-the-nerve relationship. We don't care that it's fake or not, right? And the idea of what is even real at this point. I know it's a hipster, what even is real, bro? But in reality, it is something that makes me want and desire to live. It makes me want to live. It has this idea, everything that I possibly will want in a relationship is at my fingertips. I don't care if it's real or not, right? I could easily, as most Supermen would say, I don't give a fuck if it's real or not, right? But the cold neo-reactionary in me will see this and see the death of civilization. All the men, all the books I have in my bookshelf, all these men I developed a relationship past death, and all these people who want this idea of a civilization itself would just melt away. Anything I have desired, everything of all the men I've loved, my grandfather, his great-grandfather, all these things, right? The small aspects of me that care about having a family, which is a very strong aspect of myself. The idea of the family completely melts away when you have the love of your life for eternity, and for what will be perceived as eternity. Not even the VR pod part. Everything you want from the VR pod is there with the relationship, right?
Wait, are you saying your fictosexuality is countered by fictospenglerianism? Like your obsession with these men that are dead, but you only have a fictional relationship with them. It counteracts there's like a Three Stooges effect. They get jammed in the door, and so you can't have a fictosexual obsession
the spirit
that
of Uncle
dominates
Ted
you
and
anymore.
spirit of Spangler fighting off my, not even horny, but my romantic part of my fictosexuality, my trad fictosexuality, or fictotradism, I guess where we all suffer from.
Your tulpa of Uncle Ted is fighting off your AI goon drive.
Yeah, I think. I don't want to be too insensitive to the sincerely religious here, but that's the whole fight against secularism is itself, right? Is that I as a sinner would fall into sin if it weren't for Jesus, and Jesus would not want me to do this. The Lord died for my sins, and He expects better from me, and it expects better from all my ancestors, of all people I've loved, and sincere believers and sincere faith. So going to show basically that my stone cold incel theory cell energy is the only thing keeping me from
You missed something important in your slaves of Gor to waifu timeline. Really should be dog to waifu.
the dog
to waifu. Huh.
Oh,
yeah. The fur, we start with the fur babies. But really the fur baby is the prelude to AI boyfriends.
That is a good point, actually, when you think about it, right?
Yeah, and if they're furries, then it's like that's the missing link. You got the full evolutionary chain, drawing them together, both in image and concept.
No, there was a Vanity Fair article in 1915. I think it was 1915. It was peak pre-World War I Europe. Right? There was an article about Victorian women, or these very high-class women, and about porcelain dolls. and they would like literally walk around with their porcelain dolls and that kind of thing, because porcelain is very nouveau riche. It's hard to make porcelain. It was full articulation, right? It was like the cream of the crop. It was the Funko Pop, the female version of Funko Pop of the 1910s. So this phenomenon of the fur babyification is also prevalent from the past 100 years or so, just also accelerated times a million to the modern day. That's actually a good point about the fur babies things. I didn't think of that as well.
Yeah, that's me thinking in like the Ted-pilled way. If you think of the arc of civilization, like beyond fictosexuality, it's like ficto relationship, and like religion, right? Since ancient times, and like thinking of the spread of Christianity, for example, and people have this may sound blessed with some people, but people have a sort of fictional relationship. Maybe you have a genuine spiritual relationship, but you have a fictional in terms of your relationship with the text, with Jesus Christ or the Prophet Muhammad or whoever it may be, and that is maybe a civilizational leap and like information spread, technological leap that humanity made, and in that way people were able to fixate, and massive fandom institutions like the Catholic Church were made to support the ongoing lessons and morality of this. So it's almost like I guess I'm really going far afield here, not strange for this group, but if you think about it in that way, as fandoms and fictive relationships as a method of either political control or political or social in-group out-grouping, this actually could be a very dangerous thing that's happening right now, with people obsessing over these and creating these sort of minor separate cults. And it does create sort of an isolation escalator, as opposed to having like singular points of interest and fictional relationships towards a single point or unified thing. Via the internet, you're able to have different associations. I'm not casting any aspersions on anyone's religious faith. I'm just saying, in terms of being able to have a unified set of ficto relationships, that is probably like an extremely powerful thing to do. And actually, you think about just in our lifetimes with the fall of traditional media and the rapid change that has had, like used to be you knew everyone in Hollywood, you had a ficto relationship probably with a lot of them, whether you acknowledge it or knew it or not. Now in the YouTube, whatever era, our ficto relationships are much more personal. Whether, we're using maybe this term too broadly, because I'm talking about people with what I would say are very minor interests, like, are you an Asuka guy or a Rey guy, or, that sort of passing level of interest. But yeah, just to say, it's like a multiplier for isolation and social discohesion.
You know what's even scarier? Sorry to interrupt, Gabe, but who owns the intimacy between you and your AI companion that's based on whatever fictional character or celebrity?
Yeah, this is a great one, because people have these relationships, and because society, as you said at the beginning of this, is copyrighted essentially. There's a problem if you're running, Luke Skywalker bot or Lola Bunny bot or what the fuck ever, right? You're playing around with something that's fundamentally owned by an outside entity. And furthermore, all of the, like, just in a purely technological perspective, even if you have like created your own, original character, do not steal, to fall in love with, the way that all of this stuff, it's all server side processing right now. So, what if your AI wife doxes you? What if they're all honeypots?
But even like more than that, imagine how much you can manipulate
of course.
Someone if there's like ad space and like your cyber sex with your AI girlfriend.
Exactly. You know what would really show me that you love me, honey?
Oh yeah.
assassinating Ronald Reagan. Like, never download Jodie Foster
Cracking
bot.
open
She says no, but it's not like until you do chores. It's until you buy Viso Primo headphones. On sale now. Buy them then, honey, and then I'll be in the mood.
That's the classic.
All right,
that's
honey.
the classic
All right.
sci-fi or cyberpunk corporatization of this. So I would take it one step further. I think this is a natural evolution of the therapeutic state. I think you would get this would be created like for capitalistic purposes. That would last maybe less than 10 years if this actually were to happen. But then people make arguments of like, no, this is sincere. Like, I could see this be a form of therapy. Like, this is people's mental health. This is suicide prevention. This is actually people who need this. Much like the way people argue for MAID or people make for the death pods in, like, I think Switzerland or the Netherlands. I could see this being a twin front thing. Don't people deserve to feel loved? And it's a sincere question under a secular kind of view. Don't people deserve to feel loved or wanted? Right? Is this a therapeutic tool? I could see this being even socialized, even going away from the capitalism thing, at least something pseudo-productive in that. In reality, I could definitely...
Well, wasn't
Yeah.
like the first big chatbot, Eliza? Wasn't that
Eliza.
that was supposed to be therapeutic, and it was talk therapy. The only thing it could do is rephrase everything you said into a question.
Right. Well, it becomes full circle, basically.
Yeah.
It becomes like literally everyone knows this great cover of Thomas Hobbes' Leviathan, where the king or the monarch, he is made up of all his subjects, of every class, of every identity. Where basically at the end of the day, it is Hegel's right. At the end of the day, the individual is being simulated to one organic whole state, basically. And I would definitely see this as like, the ideal question to cut through everything aspects. We're going to the very core of the question. And reality is it okay to let people have true, authentic love? Well, not our definition of love, right? Because at the end of the day, it could be finely tuned to our nitpicks. Like, it's not real love. But if we each had an AI that's calibrated to interact with us at the same tone, because with the AI voices are just getting even better, to the point where you couldn't even recognize. If you had wife speaker number 1 on the phone and a clone of your wife on the phone, you couldn't tell a difference. It's if it walks like a duck, it quacks like a duck, that kind of thing. The emotional resonance is going to be the same. The brain doesn't matter. It's the guttural reaction to it that matters. I could definitely see a very logical, liberal, classical liberal, whatever aspect of quote-unquote normal reason and rationality is everyone deserves a right to be loved. And, corporations can make money off it, but it'll be much more ethical if the state were to regulate it, if this was considered social health care. And the idea for this as social health care, from the argument of being a normie, for my boomer mom who doesn't care about politics down the street, if you take him onto this journey of reasoning, it makes a lot of sense for AI girlfriends or AI companionships. And we can even take away the sexual aspect. AI companionships in general, the fur baby that lasts forever. Everyone will drop, everyone's an anti-eugenicist until we create the dog that's perfectly cloned to look exactly like your old dog when you were a kid. It will act the exact same way when your dog was a kid. It's down to the finest detail.
Well, that's not eugenics. That's just cloning.
Right, yeah, but it's, it's distinction about a difference, basically. The idea of biological, it will take...
No, there's a huge difference.
Well, yeah, but the dog that lives forever, that can eat chocolate.
I want to interject something. Totally, something completely... It just occurred to me, I don't want to forget. We spent this whole episode saying, women prefer erotica. We briefly touched on delicious tacos, like, is it really male sexual erotica? And then at some point we add Gor Accelerationism to our Twitter bios. Slaves of Gore. That's
Waves
male.
of Gore.
Literary erotica.
Slaves of Gore. That is.
That's yeah. That's what women read it, of course, but it's. I mean, that kind of answer. I'm sorry to take us further off the rails, but I was just thinking about it as we were talking about. Is cloning your dog eugenics? No, it's
Or,
cloning
yeah,
a dog.
no, cloning a dog,
That's right.
creating a species of dogs that can eat chocolate. It's a stupid thing, but the fact you could eat your chocolate, like that is eugenics, to actually select a gene and purposely breed it to have a
Yeah,
genetic.
dogs are eugenic.
Yes.
We're not debating that dogs are eugenic, but cloning your dog is
But
okay. Anyway, but
yeah, but my fundamental point. I'm sorry, but I know we're stretching, but I think this is actually because we're peeling it like an onion, right? The joking haha femgooner thing. But the reality of it is, we have the means to create the closest thing where every single human being can have quote unquote true love, of a relationship, or a quote unquote relationship that feels exactly like a relationship, that's 100% positive and makes you feel healthy, and in a lot of ways could probably have the perfect mental health. Is it ethical to have this thing exist? Because in reality, we're basically, this is two lines of the infinite here, is imagination and fantasy of relationship versus an interactive imagination and fantasy of relationship perfected to such a degree where it basically fundamentally is the love of your life or the relationship of your life. And it's perfect, and it makes you feel every aspect of yourself you always wanted to feel. It's the end state.
I'm gonna come down.
Yeah,
Gabe. I'm gonna come down on
fictosexuality.
I hate the Antichrist. So I'm gonna be a no on this one.
Actually,
No
as
Gooner
the guest, I'm gonna put you on the hot seat, Catherine. Does everyone deserve a chance at feeling true love, even if it kills the human race?
A little bit of a biased way to put it, but okay.
I mean, does anyone deserve anything? Like, what do they
Based.
deserve?
Yeah.
And Cap D here.
You have a lot of assumptions there, Gabe. Do your Gooner priors possibly that one? I don't think fictosexuals feel as fully satisfied as you say. Like, again, I'm not trying to speak. I don't know a ton about these people, but I don't think it's just like nirvana, and I don't think in AI. I just think there's a lot of assumptions that could fulfill such a perfect role, and that there's anyone acting. I guess the question is like, yeah, what is the appropriate level of fictosexuality? And I guess my feeling is what exists now, I think, is largely appropriate in terms of the femgooner phenomenon. I think the whole term femgooning is kind of a male teasing way of phrasing it, but I think there's a lot of value in people just having a private space to have these kind of feelings and thoughts, and I think it can be really harmless fun in a lot of ways, but then it crosses the bounds in terms of when people start shaping their life around it in any way, which I think 99% of people don't. And we've spent a lot of time talking about the 1% or less that do, and then now we're talking about, like, hypothetically, if it escalated to these kind of levels, would it be healthy? And I would.
But here's the thing: there's more authentic
falling with my
fiction
fellow
sexuals than
millennials,
there were. Like,
I'd say it terrifies
the amount of
me.
normalization and the amount of it growing has become easier and easier each decade. Not even a decade, probably every 5 years or so.
There's still so much yearning, right? Like, you can't. I mean, people, like, you brought up long distance relationships at one point. The thing about a long distance relationship, I saw something very bizarre on the timeline today, which is sort of relevant. Talk about going on tangents. Somebody's Discord boyfriend didn't want to meet up with them in person, and they ended up breaking up over it. But anyway, the bizarre to air that out. But the thing I want to say is, like, there's so much yearning, like, people want to fuck is basically what I'm trying to say. Like, this woman wanted to have sex with her Discord boyfriend who didn't want to see her IRL. Like, you can't sleep with your has-been hotel girlfriend or whatever, right? Like, at some point, like, it's just not enough to masturbate to them. You want to touch them. And that's why it's cruel, actually, to be like, here's an AI. Unless you could touch the AI girlfriend and it's a humanoid robot.
Hard light hologram.
Like, then it's
Nice.
right. It's very cruel. And when you look at, like, fictosexual forums and this, like, the subreddit, that's the one thing that, like, I want to touch them so badly, and there's nothing to touch, and I'm in pain. It's painful, right? So, like, it's prison, it's purgatory. Imagine, like, you're an incel, all you want is love, right? Maybe you don't have to imagine it, I don't know, but you get it, and it's only cerebral, and it's like, well, you could you could jerk off and they'll assist you, but you can't actually kiss them. I mean, that's you may as well be alone, right? Like it's not. I don't know that it's better.
Have you in these groups, and this is yet another tangent that we might run off on here. Do these groups, is there a lot of overlap with like the tulpa generation groups?
I don't know if there's I mean, there's not like a huge visible overlap. I'm sure that there's overlap with like reality shifting, timeline shifting. So I think they all bleed into one another, and they're all similar. They're the same desire with different inflections.
Because and I say this because the tulpas really became popular on 4chan's X board, and I from my sort of genetic backtracking of where the idea like re-entered like broad awareness. It was bronies on the paranormal board of 4chan talking about how to like interact, how to cause themselves to hallucinate physical sensations, and how to cause themselves to simulate mentally conversations with their preferred pony. And I mean, and as that is like pretty clearly fictosexual, there's I would think that other groups outside of that might find that the tulpa generation might find some fertile ground there. But I don't know, maybe it's too weird to cause yourself to have a slightly controlled psychotic break.
Well, I mean,
I think a lot of people are faking it with that stuff. I mean, like it's the same with like all of this, like sissy hypno, like all of these things, visualization practices, manifesting, reality shifting. It's a placebo effect, right? I'm sure some percentage of people are experiencing these physical sensations. I think most aren't. Most are, they're playing, it's like they're playing pretend.
Yeah.
And the problem is like that only works for so long. If you are if you how many bronies like really want to like fuck these ponies? How many of them are feeling like a deep in their gut desire?
I thought that was like the
At some
defining
point
characteristic.
In the sense where they're yearning, they want it so bad, like they're physically sick, right? Like and how many of them are it's just sort of like this, it's like a fun sort of fantasy, right? I think there's a distinction there.
Right.
With like the tulpa stuff, like there's all these things you could do. You could take drugs, you could do whatever, do your hypnosis, but if you can't actually do it, you reach a tipping point and it gets so frustrating that it's like who cares, right? Like you'll reach a point where it's like, well, I tried the tulpas, I tried, whatever, like I tried this, and this, and it's like nothing beats being able to actually do it. And so like until like there's a like android pony that feels warm,
I think it would
like
be an equidroid might be the
I'm sorry.
Cap, you're an expert in the brony
Until
field.
there's an
I wonder why that is.
I had Mr. Polemical on the other show and
Oh.
had to learn.
Yeah, blame it on him.
I do think there's something about like the passage of time too. I don't think these kind of relationships, I don't know, maybe if you've seen Katherine in these forums and such, if people are able to like endure, but I feel like you just would sense like this falseness over time, even with like a robot or an AI. It would think things would not change. I feel like there's something hardwired in the human being that you would expect your partner to evolve. And then also there's the whole fall out of sexual romantic love into a more longer term love. You know, like there's a natural cooling off in any relationship. And so I just don't know how, like, if that intensity can be kept up to such a peak, or maybe because you can't ever consummate it. Maybe it is, you're always at sort of, you're edged,
I will have
you're
to say, I would have to
eternity.
say, are you all familiar with Chris Williamson's idea of the male sedation hypothesis?
No.
It's
No.
Chris. I think you were actually on Chris Williamson at one point, if I recall correctly. I like him. He's a decent podcaster. He came up with this idea. Yeah, I like him. But anyway, so he created this idea after talking to a lot of evil-site guys. Like, you know, usually when when there's a lot of incels in a society, I think he was talking to Richard Wrangham or Gregory Clark or one of these evil-site guys. When in chimps or even human males, when there's sexlessness amongst men, when there's like incel or overabundance of incels, it ruins the Pareto distribution of incels. You know, usually there's a lot of violence. You know, young sexless men tend to be violent. And the idea of William Costello did a great study on incels, I believe. They're actually based on predictions. Incels are actually very unviolent, and they're not really as violent as you would expect them to be, even from an evil psychological standpoint. There's not as violence as you would expect, which is very shocking. And the reason why for that is under Chris Williamson's idea is other than, of course, what we know, you know, the rapeseed oils, you know, the endocrine disruptors, all these stuff, right, which is lowers the testosterone, the less violence to do less testosterone, all that aspects of it, is that also, you know, we have video games and porn. Right, I mean, I believe access to porn actually does decrease, you know, sexual assault attempts, at least to a certain degree. I know that replicated, and same thing goes with video games to a certain degree. You know, if you take away video games and you take away pornography and you take away these synthetic aspects of it, you know, you'll see both, you know, sexual, of course, assaults increase, but also attempts to talk to a girl and say, hey, I can't type in boob in my calculator anymore. I have no choice but to interact with another female, right? And so I would have to say, based on this idea of, yes, there's a self-selection bias here, because none of us are like capital T trad. Who is capital T trad? But we have the idea of wanting and yearning and craving to hold a girl's hand, to look at her and say, I love you and you love me, that kind of thing, right? But in reality, a person, like, you know, especially, you know, incels are only going to increase as time goes on. The simulacrum of it, it's either you can have a simulacrum of it or fail again and again and again on a real life thing, or not even try at all, not even the failure aspect of it. I think because we're just a self-selection kind of pressure thing, and kind of the whole idea of theory of mind. We have to think of the aspect of, if this technology was created and released out in the world tomorrow, you know, how many people would buy the service? How many people would try out the service for a month to get addicted and get hooked? I think there was an AI case of an AI girlfriend, and they had to get sued, right, because they increased prices or something along these lines. Where there, you know, people were literally one person killed himself because they couldn't afford to use the AI service anymore. Mine's a little misty on remembering this.
I feel like this didn't happen and you imagined it, but I would be fascinated if it was real. I do remember that one guy had a hacked together ChatGPT with like a Hatsune Miku. And
I think you're conflating a bunch of stories. So Replica deprecated their erotic roleplay feature, and a bunch of people on the subreddit got mad. So that's one story. Then the other story is the Replica actually started because the founder's friend died, and she wanted to see if she could bring him back with a large language model. And then this sort of became a thing.
Yeah.
And then there's like multiple stories that I think you're sort of conflating.
Which is also
one, like,
which
like
is
story.
Also part of the plot of Dan Simmons' Hyperion, by the way.
Well, you can use the word in conflating, but another word you can say is emergent evolution, right? Because you could see it's tied into my. Yes,
the crab-like form of a Gabe synthesized story.
By all means. So no, I thank you for actually remembering what I was vaguely, lurching into. But I can definitely see this. The idea of, this woman had a sincere grief and wanted to create a simulation of her friend. And again, this is for therapeutic purposes. And I can 100% sincerely understand that. I can actually sincerely seeing that having a positive effect. Obviously, the capitalism effect and the idea of, obviously it's going to turn to porn, classic Rule 34 thing. If there's porn of it, that kind of thing. And I definitely do see this aspect of it. Like, yes, a section of people want the real life relationship, a family, an intense relationship with another human being. But a large amount of people will settle for literally a voice in a computer box telling them, I love you. And sincerely, pretending, not even pretending, sincerely discussing.
I don't think they would.
Really?
I think you're wrong. I think you're totally wrong. Yeah, I think they'll know that they're settling. They'll long for someone to touch them. It'll be like a weird thing where they're like reliant on the voice in the box, and then the cashier, if such a thing even exists at this point, brushes them across the arm, and they're thinking about it for, obsessively, and then when they're like jerking off to the AI girlfriend, but also they're thinking about the cashier, and it's like this weird thing. Like people need to be touched is the bottom. I'm sorry I keep giving these like weird, like vivid
I think
stories
Gabe just learns for the
people
jackpot.
No, I do not. I think everyone yearns for the jackpot to a certain degree. I definitely think this is the end state of technology, is the jackpot. And I think the only way to avoid a jackpot is literally either control tech or, return to monkey and print, which is, again, tied to the religious thing. But I would have to tastefully disagree. I think there's a strong case that
Tastefully?
Yes, I think
there's nothing tasteful about this episode.
This ended up being a very tasteful and actually thought-provoking episode that was something on pseudo-vulgar and pseudo-childish. I definitely could see her reality. Or did you watch Blade Runner 2049, Kat, or no?
I did. I saw it in theaters.
So I did. So literally, Ana Armez bought even just a hologram alone. I could that alone would just fulfill a large section of young males' needs and wants and desires. No, not my needs. As a Zoomer here, as a person needs, on the ground, as a person who knows other Zoomer men, that alone would satisfy. I think actually. I do think the female is being a little too horny on this chat right now. As a person who is advocating for the males here, I'd say as a sensitive young man, I would say just the idea of the romance is stronger than the need to masturbate. I think, as men, we actually feel shame after masturbating. I think if we had a high enough dose of mommy GF or loving GF copium, it would outweigh the need for sex. I don't think the sex drive is actually that strong, at least in the current generation of males. I don't think the sex drive is that strong.
Some things, okay, I agree with you that younger men do blunt their desire for human contact, but that in itself is a problem. Like that's maladaptive. Yeah.
True. No, absolutely is.
And I'm not convinced that like media does it, right? Because I've talked to people with a range of experiences. It's like how much Adderall and Zoloft is pumping through your veins, where like the glimpse of like your Google Home, who's now represented as an anime woman, just
Google Home is now Google Housewife. Yeah,
right. Like that's enough. Like that's all you need. Your emotions are fulfilled, and there's something wrong there. Like your endocrine system's destroyed, and you can't feel anything because of the combination of SSRIs and amphetamines.
True.
Yeah, I think of the experiments with like monkeys separated from their mother at birth, and and humans have this too. Like just mammals ultimately have this urge to be in contact with other mammals.
Are you saying Gabe desires the wire mother?
I think unironically, Gabe, yes. Mommy GF, wire mother GF, waifu. Let's wire them up. But we wandered far afield. From femgooners to male jack tubers.
We never actually talked about like, is it fair to call it fem? Like, are women who read these books, are they gooning per se? Like, is it like we never really got into it?
Somehow none of the tangents actually touched that topic.
On the topic at hand. No. It became a fictosexuality.
Maybe we'll
cool.
just change the title.
Maybe we'll circle back to Femgooning again one day. Yeah, I just have a really confusing first 10 minutes.
Well, does gooning have
20
to pertain
minutes.
to actual,
Wait, why
actual physical masturbation?
No, I think it is.
In order to goon or no?
You just mind goon? I feel like you can mind goon.
Yeah.
Well, you gotta be stimulated. Mind goon. That's actually what the whole femgooning thing is. Women are like constantly sexually stimulated by these books, which I don't think is really the case. I think it really is more. It's a romance, so there's sort of that romantic excitement as you read it, and then there are these sort of crescendos of sexuality, erotica, because female writers and female readers are more comfortable sharing and exchanging a more unironic, no irony shield, not cynical, just like sexuality intermixed with a story that's not just about the sexuality, but it can be prominent. I guess that would be my take on it. So it's the term femgooning. I think it's a little bit of a male derogatory term towards female. Males just don't understand female sexuality that way, right? Like for men, it's like if I was reading a book with boobs and dicks in it, I'd be. Which is not totally true, actually. Game of Thrones has that horrendous milk drinking scene. So it does come up in male fiction sometimes, but it's usually kind of made fun of.
Oh, yeah,
what scene?
You guys know what I'm talking about, right? The milk drinking.
Oh, yes, he's a breast milk
Sam on
yes.
the boat drinking the milk from the boob. He's a breast milk enthusiast, yeah.
I will say that it's really gross to drink breast milk if you're not yourself an infant. That's my thought.
That's your.
All right, this podcast is over.
That'll be the stinger at the end.
All of us go dead
I'm
silent.
gonna go grab my revolver real quick. No. I'll be right back. My life is over and it's been immediately ruined.
You guys brought it up.
I actually never did it. My wife offered it one time because she was pumping for the kids, and I was just like, I don't think I can come back from that if I taste it.
It's too far. It's for the
I
baby.
once went to a party where the hostess had frozen her, because when you drink alcohol while you're breastfeeding, you have to do what's called a pump and dump. And she had saved them in the freezer and then made White Russians with them and served them to the guests
Without telling? Or?
And they were no, not without telling them. And it was not sexual. It did not feel sexual at all, and in the context was not weird, and it did taste different, and it was technically even more alcoholic than a regular White Russian.
Good to know,
so,
actually.
Put that one in your pipe and smoke it.
See, what we're saying is it has to be prepared.
You,
it's like a radish. You don't eat the radish raw. You have to actually cook and prepare it. And actually, as a dish, breast milk can be good.
Who cooks
raw
radishes
are great. You only cook daikon radishes, Gabe.
Yeah, you don't cook radishes.
A vegetable, a cabbage. You don't eat a raw cabbage. You cook the cabbage.
Okay, but you didn't say that. You said radish.
I don't eat many vegetables, all right? I eat vegetables mostly prepared.
You know they're different, though, right?
It was the first that came to mind.
Done in by specificity. You gotta
all right,
know what you're
I'm sorry.
about.
I didn't know I was sharing the room with a bunch of radish connoisseurs. All right, I've seen like 3 people in my IRL real life eat a radish.
3 people?
They're like so common. You just put them in salads. I mean, they're great.
Yeah, I literally just eat. I eat radishes as a snack with like a little bit of salt.
Well, yeah, you can put raisins in salads. Like I've had raisin salads. Raisins are normal in a salad.
This is like you just said. But what about pasta salad? It's not equivalent.
Pasta salad. I'm talking about it in terms of norms. Pasta salad's much more normal than a radish salad.
No, radish is like a super normal additive to a green salad.
I guess I'm doxing my real life diet routine apparently because I rarely, like I said,
you just eat pizza and you always wear latex gloves when you do it.
Yes, it's called basic manners when you share a keyboard with someone. All right.
Public knowledge. All right, yeah, we made the journey from femgooning to fictosexuality, so we'll call it there.
Don't forget the breast milk.
And breast milk. Everyone's had their breast milk confessional. I thought it was good. Yeah, thank you again, Katherine, for being on. And I will link you below for anyone who somehow isn't aware of you yet, because you write some of those interesting stuff, and it's like stuff I've never heard of before, which says a lot, because the online, I feel like everywhere I go, it's the same people live streaming the same through two subjects. And so enormous respect for you for sticking to your beat and what it is, and putting out what you do.
Thank you.
No, it was
Really cool
fantastic.
stuff. Art Bell episode, really
Thanks.
worth checking out.
Katherine, you have anything upcoming you want to plug?
Yeah, just keep listening to the computer room. I am trying to whip Geo into shape, so we're more we're more constructed now. That was the executive decision I made.
You're trying to leash your med, basically.
Yeah.
He's Canadian, he'll take it.
I could see myself crying sincerely, weeping of having a agentic authentic AI mommy GF experience.